Master, I and you make mention. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, translated by James Haughton Woods. 6. In the second of the worlds of Brahma, in the tapas world, there's a threefold group of entities: the Abhasvaras, the Mahabhasvaras, and the Satyamahabhasvaras. These have the mastery over the elements and the organs and evolving matter. So we work towards all this, strip it down, try to figure out what's behind it all, and then you're building back up on with the mythology. By mythology, I don't mean that it's not true. I mean that they're worshiping the entities rather than, them being there, I guess. Each lives twice as long as the previous group. Their food is contemplation. Their lives are chaste. Urdhvaratas. Upwards, there is no impediment to their thinking, and in regions below, there is no object obscure to their thought. In the third world of Brahma, in the Satya world, there are 4 groups of entities: the Ayutas, the Chudanavasas, the Satyabhas, and the Samjnas. And the Samjnans. By them, no laying down foundations for a dwelling is made. They are grounded in themselves and placed one above the other, and they have mastery over the primary cause and live as long as there are creations. Kind of sounds like the jinn. They have respite. Of these 4, jinn being Arabic for all gendered beings of choice that don't incarnate in physical bodies. Of these 4, the Achyutas delight in deliberative contemplation. The Chudanavasas delight in reflective contemplation. The Satyabhas delight in contemplation where there is nothing but joy. And the Samjnans delight in contemplation where there is the feeling of personality and nothing more. These also remain in the 3 worlds. The 7 worlds are all without exceptions worlds of the Brahman. God as creator. Well, all worlds would be God as creator, but the discarnate and those whose bodies are resolved into primary matter exist in the state of release and are not placed in the worlds. By performing constraint upon the door of the sun, the yogin should directly perceive all this. Then, also upon other objects than upon the sun, thus to the extent that he should practice until all this is seen. And the symbol that is often shown on prayer mats is kind of a sun door, but not in worship of the sun. 26. As a result of constraint upon the sun, there arises intuitive knowledge of the cosmic spaces, bhuvana. And there's some interesting experiences where your prayer space and all that is just it. And he asks any Muslim that's been practicing, and a great deal of them that have, gotten into it, really, they will tell you that they've had similar experiences of the prayer gets louder, and the awareness of it becomes more and more full, in all senses. It's like nothing else exists. It's like you see other realms sometimes, people. But up to the, I typically just see lights and have good sensations and that sort of thing. Up to the pole star from the summit of Meru in this world, thus in this way, from here up to the end of the summary stanza, Samgraha Shloka, the 7 worlds are briefly described. He describes them in detail in the words, among them, above Avici, the word solid matter means earth. The word region means a place, but not a hell. These great hells must be understood to be accompanied by several lesser hells. These same are brought together under other names in the words Mahakala, and as the sun moves forward, day and night revolve about Sumeru as if it were fast bound to him. The meaning is that the night is in that part of it which the sun leaves, and the day is in that part which sun shines upon. He gives the extent of the whole land of the rose apple in the worlds. The same land of the rose apple is 100,000 yojanas. And, okay. A passage that's said every morning by some people, Surah 55, we have the idea of constant sunrises, constant sunsets. Other places talk about the day rolling and night rolling into each other. So this idea of the sun circling like a flat earth and sort of stuff, you really wonder about the preservation of the rest of the mythology if this untruth in a physical sense has been laid upon us. Or perhaps they were fragmented, there were some ideas about, and they just made up stuff within mythology. That could be true. That's sometimes true too. What kind of 100,000 yojanas? In reply, he says, it stretches out in each direction from Sumeru for half this distance. For half would be as much as Sumeru occupies the middle of it. The 7 seas, each like piles of mustard seeds, are each double the preceding. And this is the connexion of the sentence. Just as a pile of mustard seed is not heaped like a pile of rice grains, nor quite flat like the earth, so are those seas. This is the meaning. Islands are fringed with marvelous hills, so that one could say that they seem to have fringes of marvelous hills. All this circuit of the earth is encompassed by garlands of lands, and forests and mountains, and cities and oceans, and encircled by the Loka mountains. Loka is like a sphere or a world. Extends is comprehended in the midst of the egg of Brahma. Pindaloka? Is that what it's called? This well-founded configuration means that it is that whose arrangement is well-founded. He now tells us who they are that dwell there in the words, here in the lower world. So in the Islamic world, one of the things said before going to sleep is Surah 67, and we hear about the lower world with the stars. Is that the chapter where we hear about that? Or I don't think it's the only place, but all this universe, 150 billion years across, light years across? That's what they currently think the universe is. I saw a show the other day. He describes the arrangement of Sumeru in the words, Sumeru is, thus having described the earth world specifically, he describes specifically the world of intermediate space with the words, the planets. The impulsion is the functional activity. He shows this heaven world in the words, they who dwell in the world of Mahendra well, I guess you got the heavens is in the skies, but but the lowest heaven, yeah. I'm trying to explain one mythology through another, and they don't quite overlap quite as. Groups of entities are kinds of entities. He also groups the perfection. Oh, he also describes the perfection of the form of the 6 groups of the entities by saying, all these fulfill their desires. All objects yield to them, even at nothing more than a desire. Goodly to behold, that is, to be worshipped. Now, the light beings, if they have no choice and they have tasks that they're supposed to accomplish and they don't really have any choice to disobey and they accomplish those tasks because they have the power to, they're not going to do anything different just because they're being worshipped. Or if they're not accepting of worship, that might not be good for you. They delight in love, that is, are fond of sexual pleasure. Well, maybe we're talking about something else now. Their bodies are not caused by parents, but quite without cause. Without union of parents, they obtain a supernormal body from atoms thoroughly purified by particular merit. He describes the Mahar world in the words, in the great. These have the mastery over the great elements. Whatever they like, the great elements confer upon them, and the great elements remain in this or that arrangement as they desire. Their food is contemplation, means that they are seated with contemplation merely and are nourished thereby. He describes the Jhana world with the words, in the first, in accordance with the order of the worlds as described. They have the mastery over the elements and of the organs, earth and the other elements, and the organ of hearing and the other organs are employed just as they chose to employ them. He describes, in accordance with the order already described, the second world of Brahma in the words, in the second. These have the mastery over the elements and the organs and evolving matter. Evolving matter, prakriti, is the 5 fine elements. Over these they have mastery. For at their wish, the subtle elements actually enter into mutations in the forms of bodies. Okay, maybe I meant those entities were jinn, being presumed to do these things, these female entities. This is an allusion to the story of Dadikchi, whose body was the essence of knowledge in the course of austerities. Okay. Indra made it a thunderbolt, and the thunderbolts energized by the sage's activities. Okay. So say those who have the tradition twice as long as the previous. The Mahabhasvaras have double as long a life as the Abhasvaras, and the Satya Mahabhasvaras have double as long a life as these latter. Upwards in the Satya world, there is no impediment to their thinking, but from Avicca right up to the Tapas world, they discern all subtle and concealed are other things. This is the meaning. Well, if they're not translating Satya and Tapas, and why are they translating Loka, this world? Okay. That's the meaning. He describes the third world of Brahma in the words, in the third. They are so described by whom the laying down our dwelling or house is not made. This because they have nothing to hold them. They are grounded in themselves. They are such as grounded in their own bodies. They have mastery over the primary cause. At their wish, the sattva and the rajas and the tamas come into activity. They live as long as the creation, as it is handed down in the sacred word. All these, having perfected their souls together with Brahma, enter when the reversal of creation, pratisamchara, is reached at the end of the highest world, into the highest state, having thus stated the common qualities of these 4 groups of entities. He describes their special qualities by taking them up in detail with the words, Of these four, the entities called achyuta take delight in contemplation upon coarse objects. With this, they are satisfied. These entities, perhaps we can call those the gnomes. The entities called Chudanavasa take delight in contemplation upon subtle objects. With this, they are satisfied. Sylphs, the entities called Satyabhas take delight in contemplation upon the organs as objects. With this, they are satisfied. Undines, nymphs. The entities called Samjinasamjanins take delight in contemplation upon the feeling of personality and nothing more. With this, they are satisfied. Can we refer to this type of jinn with the phrase salamanders? All these have recourse to concentration consciousness of objects, and if it be asked why there is no mention here among these worlds of those who have given themselves to concentration but not conscious of an object, those namely who are discarnate and those whose bodies are resolved into primary matter, the reply is this: but the discarnate and those whose bodies are resolved into primary matter, for those whose thinking substance is in fluctuation, and to whom objects are shown, carry on the worldly affairs and remain in the world. But the discarnate, and those whose bodies are resolved into primary matter, although they have a task to perform, do not so remain. This is the meaning, all this, with the exception of the Satya world, and as far down as to avijja is directly perceptible to the yogin. Upon the door of the sun means upon the table called Sumna, and inasmuch as even with an extent of constraint, direct perception of all this does not occur, he says, then also upon other objects, that is, upon objects other than the Susumna taught by the professor of yoga, until all this world is seen. For the sattva of the thinking substance is by its own nature capable of illuminating the whole world. Well, Lucifer of the Lucifers sort of figure, the light bringer, would certainly be someone that the whole world could benefit from. May I or someone who watches this channel be such an entity. It's different than a prophet, although a prophet can coincide with that. The sattva of the thinking substance is by its own... Okay. But when covered by the defilement of tamas, it illuminates only that portion which is laid bare by rajas. It illuminates the cosmic space laid here by the constraint upon the door of the sun. But this does not apply similarly in other cases also, since constraint upon the cosmic space has power to lay only so much bare. This is all cleared up. 27. As a result of constraint upon the moon, there arises the intuitive knowledge of the arrangement of the stars. By performing constraint upon the moon, he would discern the arrangement of the stars. Upon the moon, knowledge of the arrangement of the stars. 28. As a result of constraint upon the pole star, there arises the intuitive knowledge of their movements. Then by performing constraint upon the pole star, he would know the movements of the stars by constraint upon heavenly cars. For example, the chariot of the sun, he would discern them. Upon the pole star, knowledge of their movements. 29. As a result of constraint upon the wheel of the navel, there arises the intuitive knowledge of the arrangement of the body. By performing constraint upon the wheel of the navel, he would discern the arrangement of the body. The humors are three: wind and bile and phlegm. Well, at least he wasn't following one of those other ones. The corporeal elements, dhatu, are 7: skin and blood and flesh and sinew and bone and marrow and semen. And by semen, of course, we refer to the female sexual fluid as well. Here, essa, the mention is such that the preceding element is in each case exterior to the next preceding. Upon the wheel of the navel, knowledge of the arrangement of the body. 30. As a result of constraint upon the well of the throat, there follows the cessation of hunger and of thirst. Below the tongue there is a cord. Below that is the throat. Below that the well. As a result of concentration upon that, hunger and thirst do not torment. Upon the well of the throat, the cessation of hunger and of thirst. Well, another superpower, I guess, could be, as a side note to number 30 there, is the faster. The person who fasts should be learning for the rest of their life that food, drink, the sexual urge, I can delay that until it's a lawful circumstance. By lawful, I mean the spiritual law, of course, and the physical law too. But that's how it is. It's not that you don't hunger. It's not that you don't thirst. It's just, well, no, it doesn't bother you. Because turning off your hunger and thirst can actually starve yourself to death because you think, oh, well, I haven't been hungry. And there's people who get in states like that. But the yogin should be able to get into states like that and still be conscious of what they should and shouldn't do with their body to take care of it. 31. As a result of the constraint upon the tortoise tube, there follows motionlessness of the mind stuff. Below the well there is within the chest a tube in shape like a tortoise. By performing constraint upon this, the yogin gains a motionless state, like that of a serpent or of a guana. What's a guana? Oh. Godda? It's an animal. Okay. Oh, that doesn't help too much. There's a lot of different shapes of animals, right? Whatever the yogin desires to know, one thing or another, he should perform constraint upon that. And thus constraint which leads to the cessation of hunger and of thirst, which leads to motionlessness, is taught by the words of the sutra and is explained by the comment, with an explanation which is a mere matter of reading. So it is not explained here. Upon the tortoise tube, motionlessness. 32. As a result of constraint upon the radiance of the head, there follows the sight of the siddhas. Within an aperture in the skull, there is a resplendent radiance. As a result of constraint upon this radiance, there follows the sight of the siddhas, roving in the spaces between the sky and the earth. 32. Upon the radiance in the head, the sight of the siddhas. The words in the head imply the tube, nadi, called susumna, constraint upon. That he means. 33. David Lane, in talking about Ekankar and other such groups, have talked about the structure of consciousness. So if you have this idea that upon this structure of consciousness you have these gurus and these mythical beings and all this other stuff, but if you don't, the structure is still, the consciousness still may operate like that, but you don't see these things. Jesus isn't there to meet you. Saints aren't there to meet you. You're basically accomplishing yourself, although perhaps there's some truth underlying that, but it's not that, oh, let me go to the saints. It's like, well, aren't you trying to return to God? Okay, 33. Are as a result of vividness. Pratibha. The yogin discerns all. So vividness is the deliverer. Taraka. Doesn't that relate to the word for the Jainas? Um, in that religion, the bridge builders. Of course, the first 22 of 24 were probably not that group. Um, this is the preliminary form of the intuitive knowledge derived from discrimination, just as the light at dawn precedes the sun. In this other way, Tena Va, the yogin knows all at the rise of the vivid intuitive knowledge. 33. Or as a result of vividness, all. Vivid light, that is the self-cogitation. Self-cogitation? Uha. This develops into vividness, for in the case of one who practices a constraint which leads to the elevation prasamkhyana, there results, when he attains perfection therein, an intuitive knowledge due to that self-asserting which is the preliminary indication, alinga, of the dawning of the elevation. In this way, the yogin discerns all, and this intuitive knowledge, since it serves to bring the elevation near, delivers from the round of rebirth, and so is called the deliverer. And okay, so the Goda and whatever the other animal, whatever the word for snake is, are both symbols rigidity or of stubbornness or firmness. Or, snakes don't usually take on that symbolism. Maybe I should do do a snake symbolism video. Why all the snakes? I've seen a video like that. And, anyways. In this way, the yogin discerns all, and this intuitive knowledge, since it serves to bring the elevation near, delivers from the round of rebirth, and so is called the deliverer. 34. As a result of constraint upon the heart, there arises a consciousness of the mind stuff. And the citadel of Brahma is the house of the mind stuff, a tiny lotus of the heart. There arises a discernment of that. As a result of constraint upon this, there arises a consciousness of the mind stuff. 34. Upon the heart, a consciousness of the mind stuff. The word heart is explained by the words in the citadel of Brahma, because it is great. Brahat, the self, is Brahma, his citadel, that is, retreat. For with reference to this citadel, he knows this, that it is his property. The cave is a den. That same lotus, with downward head, is the dwelling of the central organ. He gives the reason for the consciousness in the mind stuff by saying a discernment of that. By constraint upon this, he discerns the mind stuff with its own particular fluctuations. 35. Experience is a presented idea which fails to distinguish the sattva and the self, which are absolutely uncommingled in the presented idea. Since the sattva exists as an object for another, the intuitive knowledge of the self arises as the result of constraint upon that which exists for its own sake. The sattva of the thinking substance, with its disposition to brightness by mastering the rajas and tamas, which are equally dependent upon the sattva, enters into a mutation as a result of the presented idea of the difference between the sattva and the self. Therefore, the self, of which we can only say that it is intellect, chitta, which is other than the aspects, guna, and which is undefiled, chuddha, by objects, is absolutely contrary in quality, even to the sattva, which is mutable. Experience is a presented idea which fails to distinguish in these two, which are absolutely uncommingled, because the self has objects shown to it, This same presented idea of experience is an object for sight, since the sattva exists for the sake of another, but as a result of constraint upon that presented idea which is distinguished from this sattva, which is intellect and nothing more, and which is other than the aspects guna, and which belongs to the self. As a result of this, that insight, whose object is the self, arises. The self is not seen by that presented idea of the self, whose essence is the sattva of the thinking substance. It is the self which sees the presented idea, which depends upon its own self, for in this sense it has been said, wherewith, pray, could one discern the discerner. 35, let's read it without the parentheses. Experience is a presented idea, which fails to distinguish the sattva and the self, which are absolutely uncommingled. Since the sattva exists as an object for another, the knowledge of the self arises as the result of constraint upon that which exists for its own sake. When by reason of its being altogether overwhelmed by rajas and tamas, even the thinking substance, bright in form and exceedingly clear though it is, can in its mutation as a discriminative discernment be absolutely distinguished from intelligence, how much more so than the rajas and tamas, which are inert, jada, by nature. With this in mind, the author of the Sutras uses the words, the sattva and the self. Taking up this same point, the author of the comment also says the sattva of the thinking substance, with its disposition to brightness, not merely one whose disposition is to brightness, but one which has entered into a mutation in the form of discriminative discernment. Inasmuch as it is altogether undefiled by objects and bright, it is absolutely similar to intelligence. Chaitanya. So, there is a commingling, as he implies in the words equal. Dependent upon sattva means a reflection without which it cannot exist. The rajas and tamas, which are equally dependent upon the sattva, are so called in the comment. Mastered means overwhelmed. He states that there is no commingling in the words. Therefore, even the word cha is here in the sense of even, contrary in quality, not